10,000 subscribers, a giant milestone, and I cannot thank you guys enough. And I wanted to give something back to you guys. You have asked me for a while in my Q&As if I have any RPG horror stories, and I gave a minor one. But in that video from 5 months ago now, I think, I alluded that I have a worse RPG horror story, an ultimate that guy, and it's finally time to tell you guys about him. So today, I'm going to tell you guys about the narcissist that ruined my first ever D&D campaign. Without further ado, let's get started. Damn, I need something visual, and there's no text. This isn't a Reddit post. Perfect. Alright, so, where does this start? Well, it starts with me deciding that I want to run D&D. Now, I had run a couple small one-shots before, and I had played in a couple games, but nothing extensive. This would be my first ever full-length campaign, and I wanted to run Curse of Strahd. I had listened to Dice Camera Action, and I had listened to Critical Role, and both of those awesome games inspired me to get off my ass, stop thinking about D&D, and start playing D&D. I proposed the game to a couple of my friends, and few were interested, so we started up a campaign. No one in the story is relevant except for the wizard. Now, at the time, I considered this guy a friend, but there were already warning signs that I should have been paying attention to. Red flags, if you will, that I ignored for some reason. I know the reason. It's because I was socially inept. But anyway, what am I talking about? Well, let's first talk about some things about Wizard, the person, the player, not the character. So, Wizard the person, well, he was an interesting figure, to say the least. The first major red flag is how much this guy hated losing. And he hated it, like, a lot. I don't mean he was competitive, I mean any form of loss. He would get passive-aggressive, bitter, sometimes just straight-up aggressive-aggressive. It could get pretty irritating, especially since usually the losses, quote-unquote, that he endured, quote-unquote, were not that big of a deal. I mean, this guy would get bitter and passive-aggressive if he just lost a game of Smash Bros. Melee or Mario Kart. Like, that's the kind of thing that would set him off. Not a competitive game, just a game among friends. Like, he'd get annoyed at his friends because they dared to beat him. He hated bad grades and criticism in general, because nothing was ever his fault. It was always something else. You were using an overpowered character, or the professor just doesn't know what they're talking about, etc., etc., etc. I remember I beat him in like a school debate, and he would not let go of the fact that I beat him and that he should have won for like 2 months. I'm not even kidding. Now, you are almost definitely thinking, how the heck is this relevant to D&D? Well, I'll tell you. In Dungeons & Dragons, you're rolling dice with ones on them, meaning as a player, you're definitely going to lose sometimes. And this guy's hatred of all things losing, and all things that don't involve him 100% taking victory, well, it sets him off, meaning that D&D is going to set him off a lot. Winning and beating others was all that mattered to this guy, and the best D&D game is not one where you win all the time, which is definitely going to be relevant. Now, let's talk about his character. I didn't have a group session 0, I still don't. I have personal session 0s with each player to make their characters, because all of these people were new to D&D completely. I had played before, and I was a new DM, but I at least had some experience, so I helped them make their characters. So this guy, he came in with a pretty good character concept. He is the son of some powerful sages of a fallen city that was taken over by an evil bad guy. I talked with him and we brainstormed up that the bad guy is a black dragon, which I thought was really cool. He turned to necromancy in an effort to raise an undead army to take back his home. And I thought this is a really cool backstory. Of course, raising an undead army, taking back a city, that's a later levels thing, but at the time, I was in the middle of the Briarwoods arc from Critical Role, and I mean, it's pretty similar to that, so I thought maybe like way later down the line, after we finish Curse of Strahd, we can have a little homebrew section where we can talk about this guy's backstory, I can tie in some other player characters, it'll be really, really fun. Of course, this whole thing spiraled out of control very quickly, but we will, once again, get to that. So, Session 1. So, we all arrive, I set up the table, and we get going. Did I do a good job? Not really. the combat was horribly imbalanced, meaning that it was way too easy, not way too hard. There was only like 3 goblins and 1 bugbear, which the party took care of very, very incredibly easily, but we had a good time. I mean, it was fun playing this game. I had background music, I had ambient music, I had cool dialogue for the quest giver. I mean, it was a fun time. Was it good? Definitely not. There's plenty of problems I can see in hindsight, but I was having fun, and so were the players from what I could tell. Now, we get to the end of the session, and the quest giver, they find him dead and mutilated. They fight off one vampire who kicks their butts, but before he lands the finishing blows, Strahd shows up to finish them off instead. And this is where things get screwy. So for starters, the first thing Wizard tries to do when seeing Strahd is try to sell out the rest of the party and team up with the super evil vampire. Now, I get it. When you're a new player, maybe you don't realize why that's not a good thing, but still, he should be able to tell by the looks on the 2 other players' faces that they were not down with that, because they just looked confused and not happy in general. I didn't just tell him no, I gave him a surprisingly decent answer. I just explained that Strahd is hundreds, perhaps thousands of years old. He has seen so many adventures come and go. He's not going to single out this level 1 wizard as somebody who's worth his time. He took that answer begrudgingly, and the party quickly got their butts kicked by Strahd, which again, he did not like, but whatever, we keep on going, and I give a little evil monologue as Strahd, ending with a cackle. Now, I am no voice actor, I'm actually quite miserable at it, but at this moment, I was having a great time, so I was getting into it. I mean, this is the first campaign with a real story that I've run. Every one-shot I'd run before was just fighting monsters. No real story, and there was usually people helping me out. Here, I am the only DM, I'm building a cool story, and I'm having a good time. More importantly, the other players seem like they're having a good time. They seem frightened of Strahd and excited for the adventure to come, etc., etc. You know what Wizard says in response to all of this? In response to my first ever evil villain monologue, his response is, "Okay, Crispy, calm down." Look, if you want a perfect way to ruin your DM's mood or any D&D player's mood, or just in general anyone's mood when they're excited about something, just say, "Calm down," in the most condescending tone possible. Trust me, it works. At that point, the session just becomes awkward. I do a cool little tarot card reading and give the players random visions, which is neat. That brings the session back a little bit, but at that moment, the other players were just looking at him like, dude, what the heck? And we moved on. Overall, though, it was a good game. Other than those really, really awkward 10 minutes of trying to sell out the party and ruining the DM's mood, it was fun. I didn't think that we'd have any more problems going forward. And for a bit, we didn't. I'm going to describe a bunch of bad stuff that happened in this campaign, but keep in mind that all of this is separated out over the course of weeks. These issues started as not really prevalent, but as the campaign progressed, they started to ramp up and become more and more obnoxious as time went on. So let's start with this guy's mentality in combat. This guy was a spellcaster, and when you're a new DM with new players, you're probably going to need to look up the spells a lot because, as a lot of DMs know, a lot of the time players don't write down what their crap does. And in this case, that happened a lot, but it was okay with me. Everyone was new, and I just told them, hey, make sure to write this down as I'm telling you this. But Wizard, he didn't need that. He had everything already written down in a notebook, which was great. I was happy with that. That meant I didn't have to waste time looking up his spells. We could get through his turns quicker. Awesome. Here's the problem. He was cheating. He was just lying about the amount of damage his spells did. For example, Scorching Ray, he said it did 1d8 damage. It doesn't. It does 1d6. Did I know that? No, and I didn't bother looking it up because I trusted that my friend wouldn't cheat at a collaborative role-playing game of all things. Now, of course, I realize in hindsight that this fits perfectly in with the player behind the Wizard's mentality. He hated losing, and he would just do anything not to lose, including cheat, I guess. Now, I can't prove he cheated on dice rolls because I wasn't paying attention to that sort of thing. I just trusted that he wasn't. But in hindsight, he did do that thing where you grab the dice before the DM can see it. He did that a lot. But anyway, let's focus on something that I know for certain. His high dice rolls, quote-unquote high dice rolls, and near max damage on 3d8 damage-dealing Scorching Ray spells, well, that definitely put him at the top of the damage-dealing chart, the non-existent damage-dealing chart for Dungeons & Dragons. And boy, he let you know. He wasn't overly braggadocious about it, but if he was doing tons of damage that session, he'd make sure to tell you, which, again, looking back on it, is incredibly annoying considering that he was, again, cheating. If there was even an inkling that the party could lose a fight, then he would let you know. For example, we had werewolves, because this is Curse of Strahd, and there were werewolves in Curse of Strahd, and he hated that. Hated it so much. He went on this whole rant when I introduced the werewolves. The second I described them, he said that werewolves can absolutely ruin a character and they should not be able to infect people. This shouldn't be part of Dungeons & Dragons, etc. Why I put them in this campaign? I didn't put them in anywhere. It's part of the book. But anyway, he was not infected with lycanthropy in that fight, but our rogue was, and he didn't care. What happened to the whole, oh, it ruins characters thing? Oh, well, he only cares if it ruins his character. Ruins and massive scare quotes. The rogue was chill with it, by the way. They did get her cured, because of course I had a cure set up if someone did get infected who didn't want to get infected with lycanthropy. Did the wizard help with the side quest in any way? Of course he didn't. It was the fighter and the bard who did all the heavy lifting during that part of the campaign. He just sat back and did nothing because, you know, it wasn't his character who got infected, so don't have to do anything in this case. So in summary, cheating and passive aggressiveness whenever he had an inkling of losing. Great. Awesome, we're up to a stellar start. Do you know what's even better? His out-of-combat behavior was worse. He was controlling as hell out of combat. If the party weren't in a tone that he liked, he would tell them, like, oh guys, some of us are trying to take this game seriously, okay? This guy really had no respect for other people's role-playing. One time, he even just interrupted someone else, not to even roleplay. He just interrupted so that he can argue about how his character leveled up incorrectly. Like, for some reason, that's relevant, and also everyone else's fault that he did his level 6 bonuses incorrectly. I don't know. I remember in the third session, this was one of the really weird things, in the third session, he was trying to tell the bard that he has to seduce this random lady. Like, the bard did not want to do that, nor was he comfortable doing that. I was not comfortable doing that, being the helpless asexual playing the lady, but he insisted. Thank God he didn't insist for long, because that did not happen. We had a Dragonborn paladin who was new to role-playing and didn't know how to do a character voice yet. That's alright, by the way. I tried to do character voices, but that doesn't mean everyone needs to do a character voice. However, the wizard insisted that the paladin should do a deeper Dragonborn voice. And, well, by insisted, I mean that he would interrupt the Dragonborn when he's trying to talk in character to redo his lines with a better voice. That's one of those times where I was just like, dude, don't do that. Just told him that right out the gate. Because usually I had to tiptoe around this dude's massive ass ego in order to not cause a nuclear explosion at my game table, which really should have been a warning sign that this is not someone I should have had around. Like I said, this guy was my friend, or at least I thought that he was my friend. He didn't really seem like my friend when he was criticizing me for every voice I did. I mean, he'd always give me notes, and by give me notes, I mean he'd give me verbal notes. Like in the middle of roleplay, he'd just say, oh, a Russian accent should actually be done like this. Which, great man, thank you, we can talk about this later. Can we just play the game? Oh man, remember when he tried to sell at the party to Strahd? Well, that wouldn't be the last time. He tried 2 more times, and both times I gave him hard no's. Which again, Wizard did not like, because he saw that as a defeat, because I dared to deny him his player choice. He didn't get overly upset about it, but he made sure to give me a couple sarcastic remarks, just to make sure that I knew he did not like that I was restricting his ability to screw over the other players at the table, you know, his friends. He was spotlight hoggy because of course he was. He didn't care about what other players had to say. All that mattered was that he got the first and the last word in the conversations. I don't know if he was intentionally trying to steamroll other people. I know that more talkative individuals can sometimes do that unintentionally. I know I have done that sometimes in D&D games, but damn, I mean, the fact that almost no one else talked in roleplay should have been a signal to him that maybe he should back off a little bit and let someone else talk. I would try my best to bring in other characters, but inevitably, he would take the spotlight back. He seemed to care more about his raven familiar than the rest of the party. And, well, at this point, I'll update you on if we're in the sparse problems section of the campaign, or the problems are starting to manifest more and more often part of the campaign, and it's the latter. These things are starting to become more and more obnoxious. We are getting to the end of the story here, and at this point, Players are getting frustrated. We've stopped talking about the campaign. Instead of talking about all the cool stuff that happened, we're instead talking about what obnoxious thing Wizard is doing this week. And I'm starting to realize that things are getting bad. The players didn't want him kicked out because, again, we were all friends. So I had to figure out a way to deliver criticism to a guy who hated criticism. So yeah, that was fun. I settled on the classic sandwich method. Start with a compliment, then criticism, then compliment again. Easy peasy. What can go wrong? I decided to compliment his backstory and the history of his character. I really liked it and thought that it would develop more after Curse of Strahd. So we talked about that. And then I was like, hey man, with that being said, I know that your backstory is really, really cool, but I think that your character can kind of conquer the rest of the campaign. And he just brushed it off. Like, oh, okay. But anyway, let's go to this. I was having this idea for my character. And then he'd just go on and on and on. He just completely brushed it off. He didn't even get mad at the criticism or passive-aggressive like he usually does. He just ignored its very existence. I am now realizing that this is not working. This is not somebody that I want in my D&D game anymore. Every game, I had massive anxiety because I didn't know how I was going to handle this dude anymore. And he never missed a session, ever. He was always right on time, which is a great thing to have in a player that you actually like. I still don't want to kick him out of the campaign. The other players don't want him to get kicked out of the campaign because we were still friends. But not only was his behavior getting obnoxious in-game, it was getting obnoxious out-of-game too. He was getting worse and worse. His bitter, narcissistic ego was getting bigger and bigger. And I don't know about you guys, but people who are condescending, rude, mean, they're not usually my friends. Two options. I try to fix this and try to deliver criticism in a more blunt way so that he has to get it, or I have to kick him out of the campaign. I want to do the first one because I want to fix this. I want to make this work, but it's not my responsibility as a DM nor as a friend to dance around somebody's ego and to constantly cater to their narcissism. That's not my job. It's not your job either. If you have a friend who is constantly being condescending, rude, dismissive, it's not your job to cater to that. It's not. I really wish I realized that sooner. But anyway, at this point, we got 2 sessions left. And remember how I complimented this guy's backstory and said, oh wow, it could be a really cool thing later after you kill Strahd? Well, he took it a little far. When I want to chill and relax, I play jazz music on my saxophone. I'm not very good at it, but that's what I do to relax. And I was doing that. I was on my own in a practice room, just relaxing, playing my instrument. And this guy, well, he just walks in while I'm clearly doing something and said, oh, hey, can we talk about D&D? And I was like, yeah, sure, but maybe later. I'm in the middle of, and he just cuts me off, just interrupts me and takes the stand away from my space, brings it over to his chair and brings up his laptop and just starts talking about League of Legends lore. He wants me to incorporate League of Legends lore into my campaign. For some reason, I have never played League of Legends. My first ever interaction with League of Legends was the show Arcane, and this happened way before that was even conceptualized. So, what the hell, dude? He just keeps on going and going and going, just brushing off any attempt for me to say anything or do anything. So I just sat there for 40 damn minutes listening to this guy go on and on about how he wants his character to be this undead necromancer king, how he wants to kill the god of death, how Lord, I'm saying this all out loud and I'm realizing that this is ridiculous, utterly ridiculous. When I could finally talk, I just told him, hey man, doesn't that seem a bit evil and not great for the group? And he responded by telling me that I need to be more morally gray in my Dungeons & Dragons games and that he should be the BBEG. I should be thanking him. He's giving me free ideas. That's when I was done. This guy didn't care about the rest of the party. He didn't care about me. He didn't care about criticism. He didn't care about anything. I couldn't help him to be a better D&D player because he didn't think he needed to be a better D&D player. He was perfect as is because nothing was wrong with anything he was doing. Everything was 100% perfect to this guy. From there, I kind of just let the campaign peter out and started it back up again a month later after taking a break to myself and did not invite the wizard to join once again. The rest of the party were not exactly complaining about that fact. I always advise talking to people about the issues with their gameplay style before you kick them out, whether it be jokes that you don't like or just spotlight hogging or whatever. Tell them, because they can't fix a problem if they don't know it's there. I told this guy multiple times the problem with his playstyle, how it was making other people not have fun, and he just brushed it off. Like he just didn't care. Like he didn't even hear it. Like it just didn't exist. So, he was out of my game. Nothing else to be done about it. Soon after that, inspired by creators like Ginny D and Crit Crab, I changed my channel from Crispy Rats Incorporated to Crispy's Tavern. From a stupid podcast that I just made for fun to this. And you guys have been so supportive. I can't thank you guys enough for this. I mean, it's insane. I created this channel and created the series to help people to deal with these problems in their own games, because I didn't know what to do with this whole story. I didn't know what to do with the wizard and his obnoxious behavior, because I had never had to deal with somebody being that toxic, and frankly that's the word for it, toxic and bitter. But I hope that my videos have helped at least somebody out there handle these sort of situations in their own games. Good lord, I haven't even talked about everything. I mean, this video is 20 minutes long, and I haven't even covered everything. I mean, there's the time he tried DMing, which was a game that, thank God, I wasn't a part of, and trust me, his power fantasy thing carried over to that. A fact that he proudly boasted, of course. I didn't talk about his weird incel-y text messages, or the incredibly manipulative way he responded to getting removed from my game. But anyway, I guess if you guys want to see more of this, let me know. I guess that this is where we're gonna end it off. If you guys enjoyed this episode of RPG Horror Stories and you want to let me know, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of my content, then please do subscribe to Crispy's Tavern. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down to the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment 10,000 to let me know you made it to the end of the video. Thank you guys so much for 10,000 subscribers. I will see you all next time. Farewell.